AM 650 KGAB, Cheyenne's #1 news talk radio station. You're in tune with the Weekend in Wyoming program. On the phone, I believe I have Representative Dan Zwonizter. Thank you for calling in, Representative.
Thanks for having me this morning.
Well, of course, the legislature recently wrapped up. It does look like we'll have a special session, although, and maybe you've heard differently, I haven't heard a specific date on that. First of all, just a general overview. What did you think of the session?
So general overview of the session, I wouldn't say it was our most productive session in my 18 years. We squabbled a lot about money and didn't really come to a whole lot of solutions this year. Obviously, education funding was the major issue going into the session, and it remains unsolved. About 3 weeks into the session, we found out the federal government was dropping about $320 million on us for this biennium, and it just chilled the negotiations, really knowing that we didn't have to cut as much as we were expecting or talk about raising taxes.
So was that a good thing or a bad thing?
I mean, I think if you're in the education community, it was a sigh of relief for the next 2 years. We had, districts saying they weren't going to be being able to hire any new teachers, or maybe laying off some of the newest teachers, the ones who we'd just hired in the past couple of years. So short term, I guess it might be considered good, but long term, I compare it to we were at the cliff last year, and now we started building a bridge over the canyon, and we're not going to make it to the other side. So we have about a 2-year window to utilize the federal money, and then we're right back to where we are, where we thought we were 3 months ago, where long-term cost of education is just unsustainable without both some cuts and some revenue enhancement from somewhere. So, we took it to the last day, last afternoon, and I thought the House was going to continue to try to work on a compromise. We got to about $80 million in cuts, and the Senate just said that wasn't quite enough cutting, and it just failed. The Senate went back and didn't want to send another committee and said we were not willing to cut any more than $80 million. I think some of us were, but, the mood of two bodies, we just didn't get there, and there wasn't enough of a demand to have to get there when we knew we had $300 million plus coming in.
Were you surprised that no agreement was reached?
I really was. I mean, it was the most important bill of the session. We had lots of discussion, both publicly and behind the scenes, between the House and the Senate, between leadership, the governor's office. I really thought, I would say it was something that nobody liked 100%, but if we had burned through another $500 million in the rainy day fund as a stopgap, and I mean, it was really a daily, if not a twice daily, conversation on what we were doing with education, and lots of caucuses, lots of conversation, and to get to the last day and have it all fall apart, I think was shocking to just about everybody who'd worked really hard throughout the session. But I think the kind of the backstop was knowing we are going to have a special session in July. It right now slated for the 12th to the 17th, that your lawmakers will be back in town the week before Frontier Days.
So is that a firm date at this point, or is that still tentative?
I would say it's pretty firm.
Pretty firm?
The legislature has contacted all the members and said, block your calendars, plan on being here, start working on, rooms and housing arrangements for that week at least. There was some talk about it going 10 days, but as we all know, Frontier Days pricing for the 125th is going to skyrocket about that week before. So I bet we won't be in town more than a week, starting that Monday, July 12th, I believe.
Now, just to clarify, is this special session solely just to appropriate the federal money, or might other issues come up as well?
I think it's all going to be all about money. As you know, it's about $1.3 billion that's coming in for both municipalities, education, assistance for rentals, for PPP, those type of things. So it really is dedicated to having some legislative oversight on divvying up that money. We got $1.25 billion from the feds a year ago under the CARES Act, and we had, I think it was a 2-day special session and did some very kind of quick cursory funding streams without a lot more oversight by your legislative branch, and gave the governor broad kind of authority on how to spend that money. We believe, with another 1.36 coming in, that's even more expansive, that the legislature really needs to have a better handle on that money, where it's appropriated, how it's divvied up. And we have a little more, certainly more time, a couple years, with the current funding coming in on how to allocate that. And so we'll be looking more in depth about just, the legislature has the power of the purse, and we appropriate the money, and we want to make sure we're spending it on things that benefit our constituents. So, yeah, you'll see a 5 to 8 day special session to really go through all the federal money and start divvying it up to appropriate places.
Okay, I'm speaking with Representative Dan Zwonitzer, who is good enough to call us here on a Saturday, and Representative Zwonitzer on the I-80, I don't call it, I-80 toll road proposal. At the committee meeting, the committee chairs seemed to indicate that might come back for the special session. It didn't make it through committee. I believe it was Representative Burkhardt, if I recall correctly, the chair of the committee, I think, said, we're not approving it right now, but this is an idea worth discussing. It might come back for the special session. Is that a possibility or not?
Oh, I think very much so. There's two kind of major issues that are just not going away in Wyoming, besides everything else, is Medicaid expansion and road funding. We just cannot cover the costs anymore of the infrastructure for paving, for asphalt, for maintenance of our roadways. We had a 9-cent gas tax increase bill that was a non-starter to many of the new members who, made no taxation pledges or campaigned that they would not raise the gas tax, and we didn't really even have enough votes to introduce that. And it just gets more expensive every year. So I do think you'll see if tolling is the right answer, or if a gas tax is the right answer, right? They even threw out that road usage charge, which was a complete non-starter, but got everybody riled up about that we're going to start tracking mileage on vehicles. So ultimately, we don't have the funding to maintain our roads. I think if people have looked at the 6-penny project for just Laramie County, so many of them deal with just basic road infrastructure. We already have, 1 penny dedicated to roads, our 5th penny, and that's not covering the cost right now. And the state's not helping out, so, the county commissioners are taking the 6th penny to see if they can, fill that existing gap. But it's just going to widen every year until we either close some roadways or find a better structure on how to pay for our highways. And so a lot of people believe tolling I-80 is the right answer. It doesn't raise the gas tax, but allows us the revenue for all of those trucks coming through Wyoming to try to get some of that revenue back to keep I-80 intact. It's just an expensive interstate for 400.
And is dropped off right at your door. Buy local Wyoming roasted coffee at snowyelk.com.
It took me a long time to be able to say Chandler has cancer, because that is such a scary word. St. Jude takes care of absolutely everything. And knowing that we don't have to pay for all of the medical expenses, that's huge.
St. Jude allowed me to focus on being a mom to Bryce. And sometimes I'm just in awe of the impact St. Jude has, not only on this community, but the world.
St. Jude is uniquely positioned to advance the cures of pediatric cancer, I think better than any other institution in the world. The contributions make a big difference.
Donors are important to us because you get the feeling that you have a team behind you. We have the resources and we have the focus. And so if St. Jude doesn't do it, who will?
St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Finding cures. Saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
Hi, I'm IC. For many former servicemen and women with post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury, the battle doesn't always end when they come home. American Humane rescues animals needing forever homes and trains them to become free, life-saving service dogs for veterans in need. If you're a veteran or know a veteran struggling, go to AmericanHumane.org to learn about their Pups for Patriots program. Let's give our veterans a fighting chance.
AM 650 KGAB, Cheyenne's #1 news talk radio station. On the phone, I have Representative Dan Zwonitzer of Laramie County. We're talking about the recently concluded general session of the legislature, as well as the upcoming special session that looks like it's scheduled to start July 12th now. Representative, you hit on one of the other big issues, Medicaid expansion. That actually made it further than it's ever made it before, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you did vote for that in the House. This is not an issue that's going away either, is it?
I just don't believe so. I mean, it's been around now for 9 years. Idaho and Montana recently passed it. Oklahoma even got it. And if anybody tells you it's a silver bullet, it certainly isn't. But I guess the nice thing about the federal government, even though I have no idea how they're paying for it, did give us, some assurances, and I could even call it like a sweetheart deal, that if we passed it, we would not be on the hook for the money for at least a couple of years for that, 10 million portion of Wyoming. And so I think that's what really helped propel it through the House, that at this point, we're utilizing other federal monies and workforce services and social security disability payments to fund what Medicaid expansion would cover. So, Wyoming, we're the least populated state. We're demographically older, have higher rates of drinking and smoking, and just less quality health care because of our rural nature. And so for a state like Wyoming, it makes sense on par for some of our communities to help some of our citizens. And so I think those talking points and just knowing that it's not going away right under the Obama administration, and we had the Trump administration, it just didn't go away. And so I guess once the majority of the House members realized, hey, it's here to stay, they're giving us, $20 million in free money, even though we would probably be on the hook for it here in a couple of years. With everything going on with COVID, it did get to the House this year, and then it didn't make it through a Senate committee. And so there's a lot of people. There's the Revenue Committee is going to study it again next month and decide if they want to bring it back during special session. I don't know if they have the votes to do so or if they have the desire, but it is certainly being talked about as another potential issue during special session in July.
What would make anyone think, though, that if it didn't get through the general session with the same makeup of the legislature, it might get through now? Do you think there's enough people who might be swung to vote the other way on this, or what are your thoughts on it?
I think it is just a learning curve. I mean, there's a lot of people who are certainly against it, and I understand the arguments, and I think most of them are correct, that it is kind of free federal money, and it affects able working adults, and there will be some waste and fraud and abuse of the system. But on par, I do think it helps, and that communicating that message, it got kind of confusing this year. There are a lot of people talking about Montana and what had happened up there and how it had really hurt Montana, even though a lot of the Montana Hospital Association and other people from Montana said none of that was true. So there's just a lot of outside influences coming into Wyoming. There's certain ideologies that are completely against Medicaid expansion, which I appreciate, and I as a former and now current chairman of the insurance committee, a lot of them are totally spot on. But I think it's the belief that more education, when you really look at Wyoming's demographics and how we're really just supplanting funds from one pot to another pot, I believe certain House members think that education component of really letting some of the newly elected legislators get both sides of the story and look at the numbers, that they're going to come around. I don't know if that's true or not, but it is one of those issues that, as I said, I don't think is going away, and we can keep fighting about it for another decade, but I think it's here to stay at this point until we jump on. I think there are 8 states left now who haven't joined. We're the only ones in the Rocky Mountain West.
One of the big arguments against it, and I know you've heard this probably numerous times, is that although roughly 24,000 to 25,000 Wyoming residents are projected to get coverage through this, there's a fear that the actual numbers would be a lot larger than that. We'd get stuck with the bill. How do you respond to that?
And I think that 24,000 really is the right number now that we've studied it. Those people who've been around the discussion, 5 or 6 years ago, we were estimating 17,000. And so based on, the sheer numbers of people that came what we call the out-of-the-woodwork population, we have revised our estimates up to, I think, around 24,000 Wyomingites. So I do think that number is actually the correct number with, all of the data that we've been studying for 10 years now. But I do remember a decade ago it was 17,000. So, and they were correct. When you start allowing able-bodied adults access to medical care so they're not working two jobs, they're going to take advantage of it. And a lot of people have been putting off their health care, who have their first advantage to, get health care when they haven't seen a physician in 10 years. They take it. And I don't know if people were expecting that to happen originally, but that has been taken into account, and now that's why the revised figure of 25,000.
Okay,
it's a huge number, right? It's 10% of our working population, which should scare people that, we have that. I mean, we have more than that who don't have health care in the state, but yeah.
There are those who argue, though, that we shouldn't pay for able-bodied people to get health care. How do you respond to that?
I completely agree. And as I said, those talking points I think are totally accurate. There is going to be abuse and waste and some fraud as part of the system. And it just, we've seen it in other states. It'll happen here if we do pass Medicaid expansion. But, there's another segment of people that it does affect who, desperately need it for them and their families who are working multiple jobs. And it reduces, now that I work at a hospital, uncompensated care, debt care, charity care. And so in many ways, I think it just funnels money around. The scariest statistic I've heard lately, though, when our census report came out, right, we've gained only 2.3% population in a decade, which is for the state. For Wyoming or for Laramie County, it looks about 9%. So we're actually doing stuff right here. But the projections show that, we're going to gain 50,000 people the next 20 years, and the demographics, all those people are going to be over the age of 60. So we have some serious work cut out for us, because it says, the demographic projections show in 15 years, less than half the population will be in the workforce. Either they'll be, over retiree age or school age. And so we have some challenges ahead on trying to figure out how to keep our economy going and while keeping our tax base low.
How are we going to fund anything if that's the case, though? That's a tremendous load on the working population.
It is. And I don't think your legislature has a good answer for that. We're just kind of watching the studies come in, and it's looking increasingly bleak. The one positive news is oil prices have gone skyrocketing back up. I think they're at $63 at Henry Hub, or at WTI this week. And so, the good news is our economy is getting better. And since oil prices are in the 60s, that's money that we did not expect to be, in this year. It's coming in, and so I don't think we're going to have to cut anymore. As you know, we cut about 300 positions out of state government. We're down under 8,000 state government positions in Wyoming. We had a time where we were up to like 9,400. So the good news is I think for the next year we're not cutting anymore, even when the federal funds go away. But we have real challenges on, 10 years from now, how to keep our economy going, because coal, oil, and gas, I think people realize long-term it's not sustainable like it was 50 years ago. And so even your Republican-dominated legislature has to, is looking at that reality and saying, what can we do to shift our economy to get the most out of coal and our natural resources, try to find innovative ways to keep coal going. But we got to start figuring out how we're going to meet our demographic change in 15 years.
With coal probably, according to most people, and there are people who would argue this, but coal probably not ever coming back to where it was, how are we going to pay for capital construction for schools in the future?
The honest answer is we don't know. Some of that will be from oil revenue, but now that the environmentalists have come after coal, oil is going to be next in the next generation. And so fossil fuels are just going to increasingly be under attack. We've seen that from the Biden administration, and there's no reason to believe that that's going away. So Wyoming has relied on being a mineral state for a long time. We're looking at ways to continue being an electricity state, either through solar or wind. But we're going to try to get as much out of coal and keep, that's what pays our taxes in Wyoming, is coal and oil. Regardless if people like it, that's what keeps people employed and keeps, our government funding historically stable. So when people complain, why are we sticking to coal? Well, nobody wants to raise taxes on anything else. And so keeping coal around as long as possible has been kind of the legislative focus to try to, as much as we can ride that horse, we're going to ride it. So there is no good answer about what we're doing in 15 years that I've heard legislatively, but it's going to be finding some economic diversification, a new industry, finding a way to make cleaner electricity through coal. I mean, we're exploring all avenues, but there's a lot of challenges in any avenue we're taking, and that's just part of public policy, right?
Do you think a state income tax is inevitable at some point?
I think when push comes to shove, having a graduated income tax, the Revenue Committee looked at just taxing those who make more than $1 million a year. I think that is actually a very feasible option. There's only 800 households in Wyoming who make over that, and it would bring in over $100 million. Most of 94% of that, I believe, is in Teton County. It's the billionaires who continue to move into one portion of Wyoming, and they're getting a whole lot of services and tax breaks without paying their fair share. So I'm one of those people that I'm okay with an income tax if it only, affected over a certain threshold. And I do think that's fair from the benefit that a lot of the, ultra millionaires make. Do I think it's inevitable? No, I think we would raise a sales tax first, maybe the property tax some. People believe that any income tax will start the camel's nose under the tent and, impact everyone eventually. But we have to find another revenue source, either through natural resources, non or renewable resources, or taxation, or something else we haven't come up with yet. But yeah, Wyoming can't rely on coal like it has for the past 5 generations much longer. Some people are predicting by 2030 coal will be less than 4% of the grid. So it's scary.
Now, as you know, speaking of an income tax, there has been in past sessions a proposal for a corporate income tax, specifically targeting large out-of-state companies. That actually had some support. It went down. Is that idea dead forever or not?
No, I don't think so. It went down by 2 votes, roughly, in the Senate. Wyoming and South Dakota are the only 2 states that don't have some type of corporate income tax or gross receipts tax. And there's just some of those multi-million-dollar big box shops that make money off Wyomingites. We pay the same prices at our Walmart or Target that they pay in New York City, which doesn't make sense, and that revenue does not get shared with Wyoming. And so there are, economists in the legislature who believe that putting on a corporate income tax would not actually raise the price of the goods that we buy in those corporate stores and would contribute somewhere between, the study shows, $30 to $50 million a year into our coffers. And so I don't think that issue is dead. I think a corporate income tax may be the easiest and most painless way of raising taxes that would not affect the everyday citizen of the state. But again, corporate income tax, it sounds very scary because there are people who believe a corporate income tax is one step closer to a personal income tax.
In terms of going forward, as you know, basically tax proposals this session just didn't make it through. At some point, though, we're going to have to approve some new taxes somewhere, aren't we?
I think so. I mean, we've been preaching Armageddon for a couple of years. It was coming to a head this year, and then we got $1.25 billion in the CARES Act, and now another $1.36 billion from the feds. It's saving all of our bacon right now, plus some oil prices going up. But that federal money has got to run out sometime, and when it runs out, I think it's going to be even twice as bad. There won't be any federal money, and the feds will be so far in debt they're going to start taking away state programs and state aid, which will put us in a double spiral. So I don't know what the answer. The great news is we've built up our accounts, our permanent mineral trust fund, our rainy day fund. 30% of the budget almost is coming off interest from those accounts. And so I think we have guaranteed that Wyoming will be a low-tax state no matter what. But, we could raise the sales tax 1 cent, our personal property tax 1%, and still be in the bottom 3 tax states in the country. So if you look at property in Nebraska and South Dakota, our surrounding states, it's crazy the taxes they pay, double in South Dakota for what Wyoming pays. So I do think there is a little bit of room without a lot of harm for a small level of taxation that's broadly applied across, everyone. But the good news is it's not looking like it's going to happen in the next 2, maybe even 4 years.
Okay.
Unless we find something else, We got to find a revenue source eventually.
Looks like we're out of time. I do appreciate your time this morning, Representative. Thank you.
It's good talking to you. Thanks, but.